Down here. Oh. Hey, welcome back. We're going to be doing how to set a shearing machine. So I took the old comb and cutter off. This here is a 13 tooth sheep shearing comb with flared sides, and this is a 4-point cutter. This is a 3 inches wide. Most machines nowadays use a 3-inch wide with a 4-point cutter. This old head piece here, they used to use a 2.5-inch wide with 3-point cutter, and it just takes more movements to shear a sheep, more blows, or it just covers less space on an animal. So they upgraded to a 3-inch. This is still actually pretty good for like really small sheep that have little nooks and crannies like a Shetland or something small. But for most breeds of sheep, a 3-inch is what you need. This here is a camelid comb with, I believe, 21 teeth, 20 or 21. And because since llamas and alpacas have hair, it's just easier to slide through and cuts it, and so it's supposed to do a better cut. So how we do this is what you're going to need. It's best to have a 90-degree angle screwdriver. There's also, like at Harbor Freight, you can get like ratchet screwdrivers and such. But on these clippers, and these, it doesn't matter which make or model you have, they're all fairly uniform. Sorry, it's a bit dirty. I shear thousands of sheep and didn't take the time to clean it. You have these two screws, and what you're going to do is, the cutter here has these holes, and the different holes, there's six total. Well, depending on which machine company you use, they're built to work on multiple companies' machines, I guess, basically is what I'm trying to get at. And so Oster's, they have these two outer ones, and the two up at the top. So what you're going to do when you set them, fits through. You also want the bolts here to be very loose, quite a bit of gap. And then also what you want is this knob here, which does tension. There's a rod that runs inside to put tension on this here. So you want that turned left to be pretty loose as well. Set the cutters on the way back end of the comb. Put them on, and what you're going to do is you're going to slide the comb back, and what you're trying to do, the goal is I got too loose attention on the bolts. What you're trying to do is these two center points, you want even with the what is it? These combs, you have the flat piece here, and then at the edge it's a scalloped edge, and you'd have to look under a microscope or look really close, but you'll see a kind of a crescent shape. Hopefully, we'll see if we can zoom in here. There's the flat. So what you want to do, hopefully, yeah, right there, is you want the points to be all the way at the edge where the flat portion meets the edge of the scallops. And hopefully you can see there like that. So anyways, and it takes a little bit of time getting used to setting it. You'll also notice sometimes that when you first buy a pair, it'll sit really far back, but as these get sharpened and sharpened, you'll keep on pushing further out. But you just tighten these a little bit, and you'll come back and check. But like if you notice, this one here, this point here is extending too far out. So what we'll have to do is come back and drop it a little bit, tighten it back up a hair, and check it again. And when you have a light tension here, back here, you can actually, well, you can actually swing it back and forth a little bit. But I need to. The reason why we're doing it like this is if the cutter, which is the top part, is too far out of the comb, you're going to have a lot higher risk of cutting your stock that you're shearing, your sheep or Angora goats or what have you. That's getting pretty close. So you don't want that. You want it even with. That's getting a lot closer. And it really isn't that. It's really hard to explain. But once you get a look at it better. So hopefully, let me look through the camera. You can see that this point here is right on the edge of where the flat meets the scallop. And that's pretty good. Once you've got it set, just evening it out. There we go. So once you got it set, that's when you can actually tighten it down pretty good. You don't want to do extremely tight, but you don't want it loose at all either, because once the machine starts working, the comb and cutter will fly apart if you don't have it, if it's too loose. But what you're going to do to finish tightening it is, like I said, there's this rod that puts pressure on the cutters, or yeah, for the cutters and the comb here. So you just keep on turning right. Normally for these hand pieces, you hold it to where you can actually hold the entire machine just by this little knob to where it's parallel, and then that's pretty good pressure. And then if you want, you can turn a little quarter turn past. My machines are really old and I put more abuse through them than most people, and so that's pretty much it. What you'll do before you shear is, when you oil, you can use a like 30 weight oil, and you can put a little dab. These are actually a oil well here, and on the other side, or actually you can see here. So you can put a little dab of oil on the combs. That way it'll oil that up, and then put a little bit back in here. And depending on your machine, they'll normally have anywhere from like 2 to maybe 4 holes throughout the machine that you'll oil. as well. Also, you want to make sure that back here the air intake is clean. Once you've sheared quite a few animals, it can get, especially llamas and alpacas, they'll get full of like hair debris in here, so you want that fairly clean. You can actually pop out the pop them out and you can replace them, or you can just wash them really good, or what have you, and then just slide them back in. And they're very for the most part simplistic machines, not a whole lot of parts. You can grease these up every now and then, but hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, let's see if we can zoom in real quick, and I'm trying to get a good angle where you can see, but that tine there is right at the edge, and you can sometimes you can get them to slide back and forth if it's really loose, and you can check, make sure all the tines are inside of the scallops. Flared versus straight combs. I don't have a smaller tooth one, but straight tooths are, a lot of people think it's more for like it's a generic comb. It'll work for most breeds of sheep in most breeding conditions and elements and stuff, so it's very generic. These flared tooth are a little bit more for speed, for more practiced users. Now, as for teeth, if you're new at shearing sheep, definitely get a 13 tooth comb for sheep and or Angoras. You'll see that they have 9 and 10 tooth combs and 7 teeth combs, which they have larger gaps in between them. You don't want to use those if you're inexperienced, because you're going to cut the crap out of sheep. Because like my finger can't go through this, but if it was a 7 tooth comb, you could fit your entire pinky or thumb even through the teeth, and you could just cut yourself up really bad. So not just yourself, but sheep. And so that's one thing to look at when you're looking at buying combs and cutters, is definitely start off with a 13 tooth just for safety. And when you're shearing the sheep, always pull the skin as tight as possible and shear on flat surfaces of the animal. That way you don't run risks of cutting them. But here's a better way to show for the scallops. Hopefully, trying to get a good angle. Where the shiny, there's a little piece of metal beyond where it's shiny. That's where you want to line up with. Is that the edge? So right there's where it's set up at. And the actual distance, I can't actually tell you, it's a 1/4 inch or whatever, because that's going to vary from how, depending on how new your comb is and how many times it's been sharpened. And because every time it gets sharpened, it gets worn, and it varies. Now, how to tell when to switch out your combs and cutters? You actually want to switch out the set, not just the comb, when your equipment's getting dull. Because what's happening is when the comb and cutter are going back and forth with the tension rod, putting tension between the two, when debris like sand or dirt or sticks or what have you gets caught in between the two, they start creating matching grooves. And so if you were to just replace one of these, either the comb or the cutter, when they start getting dull, they're going to accelerate those grooves on a fresh piece of either the comb or cutter that you swapped out with. So you want to actually take off the pair and put a fresh pair on your machine. That way you're not it's just going to make your equipment last longer, really, and so you're not going to have to pay or take time to sharpen them as much. So the way to tell when they're starting to get dull, first off, your shearing pattern on the sheep, you're going to notice there's going to be some waves when you're shearing the sheep, where maybe particular tines are more dull than others, and so they're leaving more fiber on the animal in certain sections compared to others, so it leaves like a very wavy, inconsistent pattern while you're shearing. Another thing you can notice is on the comb itself there are going to be scratch marks on these tines, or the teeth of the comb. So you'll actually you'll actually notice that there'll be multiple scratches, and you'll know to switch it out. But it's really it's a combination of seeing the scratches as well as kind of like a feel. If it gets harder to push through a sheep, could be because your clippers are getting dull and it's not doing quite as good a job. So hopefully that helps.